Every single ticket, gone. The Foro Italico, sold out, overrun, overwhelmed, and Alex Eala hadn't even stepped on the clay yet. Boris Becker stood inside the broadcast booth at Rome's Italian Open and stared at the numbers. Then he stared again, because what the data showed him didn't belong in any framework he had built across 4 decades inside professional tennis. A 20-year-old from the Philippines, ranked 42nd in the world, carrying a 2-3 clay season record, entering a draw so brutal it made seasoned veterans flinch, had triggered the kind of ticket hysteria Rome reserved for its champions, its icons, its legends of the red dirt. Not a Grand Slam title to her name, not a WTA 1000 crown, just a name, just a presence, just the phenomenon that the sport's most decorated commentators have been scrambling to categorize ever since Miami cracked the World Open 14 months ago. And when the Foro Italico erupted around her, Boris Becker said something that stopped every conversation in the building. Stay until the final word, because what he said, and what it means for women's tennis, will fundamentally alter how you understand this sport. There is a particular quality of silence that settles over the Foro Italico just before a tournament begins. A held breath, an ancient stillness unique to grounds where champions have walked for nearly a century. The red clay breathes differently here. The Roman light hits the courts at an angle that makes the ochre surface glow like something consecrated. And the stone pillars, the marble statues, the majestic sweep of the Tiber just beyond, all of it conspires to create an atmosphere that tells every player arriving for the Italian Open exactly where they stand, inside one of the most storied sporting venues on the planet. Alexandra Ayah arrived in Rome on the first week of May 2026 as a 20-year-old ranked number 42 in the world, carrying 12 months of relentless growth since the Miami Open detonated her name across the global tennis conversation. She had spent that intervening year building, grinding, expanding, a WTA 125 title at Guadalajara in September 2025, the first Filipino ever to claim that milestone, a historic U.S. Open victory over Clara Towson in August 2025, the first match win by a Filipino in a Grand Slam during the Open era, a moment that generated front-page coverage across Southeast Asia and 30 seconds of silence in a New York crowd that had just witnessed history. A 2026 Australian Open debut that descended into beautiful, magnificent chaos when the queues outside Court 6 in Melbourne stretched back to the shadow of Rod Laver Arena itself, with thousands of Filipino supporters unable to force their way into a venue built for 1,000, not a nation's worth of devotion. She arrived in Rome with a 16-11 win-loss record for the 2026 season and $565,609 in prize money already accumulated. She arrived having just climbed 2 ranking positions following a second-round exit at the Madrid Open, a defeat to 19th seed Elise Mertens that stung but extracted from her one of the most telling quotes of her evolving professional identity. When asked how she prepares for stronger, bigger opponents, Ayla replied with a precision that revealed exactly how her mind operates. You could argue that everything I do is to prepare myself for those players. I'm in the process of still getting stronger, still being more powerful, but I think I have different, other strengths as well, not just power. Different layers to my game. Different layers. That phrase lodged itself in the consciousness of every analyst, journalist, and tennis commentator who heard it, because it described not merely a game plan, but a philosophical approach to competition, the understanding that power is one instrument among many, and that the player who masters the full orchestra rather than the loudest note holds the deepest advantage. She arrived in Rome carrying all of that, and she arrived knowing something that the Foro Italico, the Italian Open organization, and Boris Becker seated inside the broadcast facility had only just discovered. The Filipinos were already there. Hundreds of them, dispersed through Rome's streets, stationed outside the tournament gates hours before any ticket windows opened, draped in Philippine flags, carrying banners hand-painted in Tagalog, wearing Ayla's name across their backs in a city where tennis crowds had historically cheered for clay court royalty from Italy, Spain, and Eastern Europe. She had said it herself 12 months earlier during her 2025 Italian Open debut. I didn't expect such a big Filipino population here in Rome, but even just walking the streets, I've run into Filipinos 5 times already. When we walk in the streets, you know when you're seeing another Filipino. It's such a blessing, of course, to have such a big community. If that was a surprise in 2025, the 2026 version represented something categorically overwhelming beyond surprise. What happened at the ticket windows the morning before Ayla's first match? Tournament officials are still processing it. Here's exactly what unfolded. Tournament operations at the Foro Italico function according to decades of institutional experience. The Italian Open, formerly the Internazionale BNL d'Italia, has hosted the greatest players in tennis history across nearly 80 years of competition. Its organizational apparatus has managed Federer fever, Nadal's 10-title dominance, Serena Williams' presence, Sharapova's popularity at its absolute apex. It knows crowds. It understands demand. It has processed the logistical reality of a globally beloved sport converging on a single Roman venue for 10 days every May. Nothing in that accumulated experience prepared it for Ayla. The morning before her first-round match against Poland's Magdalena French, world number 45, a former top 22 player, dangerous on clay, carrying recent form concerns through a 5-match losing streak, ticket availability for the court assigned to host the Ayla match registered 0. Not low, not limited, 0. Every allocation consumed before the sun had fully established itself above the Foro Italico's stone-edged skyline. The speed of the sellout didn't merely surprise tournament staff, it destabilized scheduling assumptions that had been set weeks earlier. Match assignments had been allocated across courts according to estimated demand, standard procedure for any WTA event. The standard procedure had spectacularly, comprehensively failed to account for a phenomenon that had been building in plain sight for 14 months. What had been observed at Melbourne Park in January provided the clearest precedent. The BBC reported that thousands of Filipinos descended on Melbourne Park, creating a logjam outside Court 6 and a line that stretched several hundred yards through the grounds during Alex Eala's Australian Open debut. The court held roughly 1,000 spectators. The demand exceeded it by multiples that tournament organizers, according to multiple accounts, had neither anticipated nor prepared contingency measures to absorb. The pattern had repeated at Abu Dhabi in February. Former Australian number 1 Daria Saville, observing from her broadcasting position, described what she witnessed with characteristic directness. You can see in the crowd numbers whether Ayla is playing or not. The Filipinos are showing up for their girl, and I love it. Then she added something that every tournament director on the WTA circuit should have engraved above their scheduling desks. If I was a tournament director, I would do anything for her to be at my tournament. I'd also make sure that she's on schedule every day, singles and doubles, because then people come to watch Ayla and then stay for more tennis. Sports journalist Ben Rothenberg, covering the Australian Open from the grounds of Melbourne Park, posed a question to his audience that captured the scale of what was happening. Genuinely wondering if Alex Eala is already the most popular player in women's tennis right now? And at the Foro Italico on this Tuesday morning in May 2026, that question required no further investigation. The answer stood in the queues, in the sold-out notifications, in the overflow clusters of Filipino supporters gathering outside closed gates, phone screens raised, searching for live streams, determined to absorb every point of an Ayla match, even from beyond the venue's physical perimeter. And inside the broadcast facility, Boris Becker, 6-time Grand Slam champion, 3-time Wimbledon winner, one of the most analytically perceptive voices in tennis commentary, had just been handed the attendance figures. His expression, by multiple accounts from those present, combined two things rarely found together on the face of a man who has spent a lifetime being unsurprisable. The 2026 Italian Open draw was not kind to Alex Eala. It was not merely difficult, it was the specific variety of difficult that makes experienced tennis analysts reach for words beyond challenging, the kind of draw constructed, seemingly by some capricious force of tennis scheduling, to ask the hardest possible questions of a player at the earliest possible moment. Her first-round opponent, Magdalena Frech of Poland, world number 45, a former top 22 player who reached a career-high ranking of number 22 in November 2024, a player with victories over Emma Navarro and Mira Andreeva, both ranked inside the top 10 at the time those results were recorded, dangerous on clay. Currently on a 5-match losing streak that makes her, in the particular mathematics of professional tennis, precisely the kind of opponent most likely to rediscover her best tennis against an opponent whose crowd support could sport combustive motivation. Beyond Frech, the potential second-round test of 31st seed Wang Zhiyu, then, if Ayla advanced that far, an entirely plausible third-round collision with Elena Rybakina, the 2026 Australian Open champion, world number 3, a player whose serve and backhand represent arguably the most technically formidable combination on the current WTA tour. And beyond Rybakina, Marta Kostyuk in the 4th round, the same Marta Kostyuk who dismantled Ayla 6-0, 6-1 in the 2025 Italian Open first round. The quarterfinal possibilities included Madison Keys and Alina Svitolina. The semifinal landscape featured Iga Swiatek, Jessica Pegula, and Karolina Muchova. The final, potentially Aryna Sabalenka, Coco Gauff, Jasmine Paolini, or Mira Andreeva. It was, by any fair assessment, a nightmare architectural construction through which a 42nd-ranked unseeded player would need to navigate 7 consecutive victories over opponents capable of defeating her at any point. The draw had been described by one tennis outlet as a nightmare for Ayla. That framing, while accurate about the difficulty, missed something about how Ayla processes adversity. Her entire professional existence has been built against structural disadvantage. She entered Miami 2025 as a wild card ranked 140th and defeated a French Open champion, an Australian Open champion, and the world number 2 in succession. She won matches nobody's algorithm predicted. She performed in atmospheres of pressure that would destabilize players ranked 50 positions above her. She entered Rome with a 16-11 record for 2026, with $565,609 in accumulated prize money, and with the knowledge that every match she plays now carries the eyes of an entire nation alongside every point.